What the camera sees that nobody expects. A body cam is never supposed to capture what is about to happen. It is strapped to an officer before a shift that is, by all appearances, going to be exactly like the one before it. The camera rolls. The shift starts. The officer gets into a cruiser, or pulls onto an interstate, or answers a dispatch call, or stops a speeding car at 2 in the morning. And sometimes, not often, but sometimes, what happens next is something that nobody in the history of that department has ever had on film before. A moment so rare that the officers involved will describe it years later using words like impossible and miracle and meant to be. Today's episode is 6 of those moments. 6 verified body cam incidents, all from 2023 through 2025, all captured on the cameras that officers wear every single day. Not reenactments, not dramatizations, real footage, real people, real seconds on the clock where someone's life hung on what the person wearing that camera did next. We are going to see what happens when a 1-year-old girl gets pinned beneath a flipped SUV on a Texas highway, and a group of strangers and officers do something that footage made famous around the world. We are going to hear the 40-minute conversation that an NYPD officer had with a man standing on the edge of a Manhattan overpass, and we are going to see what happened to that officer the moment the man was pulled to safety. We are going to watch a K-9 officer in Michigan arrive at a house in under 2 minutes after a call that no officer ever wanted to hear, and do something he had only ever practiced in a training room. We are going to ride along on a traffic stop at 2 in the morning in a Michigan suburb where a speeding driver's reason for running the light turns out to be the most legitimate reason anyone has ever given a police officer for doing exactly that. We are going to be there when an Indianapolis officer walks into a home where a mother didn't know she was pregnant until she was holding a newborn who wasn't breathing. And we are going to stand on the top level of an Ohio parking garage in November 2024 as an officer looks at a woman on the edge of a railing and tells her something about himself that he almost certainly never expected to share with a stranger in the dark. Every moment in this episode happened. Every name is verified. Every detail is documented. The body cam footage that anchors each story was released publicly by the agencies involved and has been viewed by tens of millions of people. But footage alone is context-free. The camera captures the moment. It does not tell you who the people are, what led them there, what was running through their mind when it was over, or what the moment cost them and gave them at the same time. That is what today's episode does, moment by moment, starting with one that begins, like the best and worst things do, on a completely ordinary Thursday morning on a Texas interstate at exactly 9:30 in the morning. Before we get into these moments, I want to know which type of body cam moment hits you the hardest. Is it the pure physical emergency, the race against time to save a life? Is it the slow burn human connection, the conversation that pulls someone back from an edge? Or is it the impossible coincidence, the moment where the universe seems to have arranged something deliberately? Tell me in the comments, and let's see which of today's 6 moments you think is the rarest of them all. Moment 1. Lift the car. Fort Worth, Texas, October 23rd, 2025. Thursday morning. Interstate 30, near East Chase Parkway in East Fort Worth. 9:30 a.m. traffic is moving. The sun is already up. A red Hyundai Veloster is traveling on the interstate with a woman and her 1-year-old daughter inside. Then, in the fraction of a second that separates ordinary from catastrophic, the car flips. It rolls, lands on its roof on the grassy shoulder of the highway, and both the mother and the 1-year-old are ejected from the vehicle. The mother lands on the ground. The baby lands underneath the overturned car. The car is sitting on top of her. She is 1 year old. She is not moving. And the first officers on scene, Sergeant R. Nichols and Officer E. Bounds of the Fort Worth Police Department, arrived to find witnesses already surrounding the wreckage and a baby who is not visible to anyone because she is trapped beneath several thousand pounds of metal on the shoulder of I-30. The body cam footage released by the Fort Worth Police Department the following day captured what happened in the next several minutes, and the footage received over 130,000 views in its first 24 hours. But the numbers don't explain what makes the footage so difficult to look away from. What makes it impossible to look away from is the sound. You hear the officers arriving. You hear the urgency in the voices. Not panic, but a very specific kind of control fear that comes from training meeting reality at full speed. And you hear the moment someone figures out where the baby is. To understand the geography of those first moments, it helps to understand what the scene looked like when the officers arrived. A red Hyundai on its roof on the shoulder of an interstate. A mother on the ground. Bystanders who had pulled over and were standing around the wreckage, pointing and shouting, some of them trying to figure out if everyone had gotten out. A normal crash scene presents the occupants in or around the vehicle. This one didn't. The mother was visible on the ground. The baby was not visible anywhere. The car was upside down. It would take one of the officers or bystanders getting low, getting close to the ground beside the chassis, to realize what was there. Hey, the baby's under here. On the body cam, an officer's voice cuts through the background noise. Hey, over here. We need to move the car. I think the baby's under here. That sentence, I think the baby's under here, is a pivot point of everything that follows. Because what it means is that Officer Bounds, or Sergeant Nichols, or someone in that group of officers and bystanders who had stopped their vehicles on the interstate to see what happened, had realized what wasn't visible from a standing position. A 1-year-old girl was pinned beneath the chassis of the overturned Hyundai. What happened next has been described by nearly everyone who watched the footage as instinctive. Officers and the bystanders who had stopped, ordinary drivers who had been on their way somewhere when the crash happened, began pushing the car. Keep moving, keep moving. An officer's voice, steady and urgent at the same time. They were lifting with their hands, leaning their weight into the body of the vehicle, trying to raise it enough to reach the child underneath. The car is not a small object. An average sedan weighs between 3,000 and 4,000 pounds, and this one is on its roof, which distributes the weight differently than a car sitting normally. What they were doing, with their hands and their bodies, required more than any of them could physically do alone. And somehow, collectively, they did it. Officer Bounds reached under the raised vehicle and pulled the baby out by her legs, laying her on the ground in the grass beside the highway. Sergeant Nichols was beside him in an instant. The baby was unresponsive. She had a pulse, faint, but present. What she didn't have was breath. Nichols began chest compressions. Bounds cleared her airways with his fingers, removing grass and debris that could be blocking the airway. The two of them knelt beside this 1-year-old girl on the shoulder of Interstate 30 and did what their training had taught them to do, and they prayed. Nichols said it exactly that way afterward. We began to wake, just praying on the inside that the Lord was just going to work the problem for us. The cry, a hum, then a cry. The baby made a sound. The officers heard it, and the footage captures what happens next in every voice on the scene. A collective exhale, a shift in the air, the specific physiological release that happens when a body that has been running on adrenaline and terror gets one clear signal that the worst thing has not happened. Bounds, speaking to reporters days later, said his instinct as a father took over as much as his instincts as an officer. He said his first thought had been to reach into her mouth and pull out anything that could block her airway, because that is what you do for your child. Both the baby and her mother were transported to the hospital. Both were stabilized. Both are expected to make full recoveries, according to Fort Worth Police. Fort Worth Police Chief Eddie Garcia posted to social media within hours of the incident. A direct call, according to the department spokesperson, because the chief wanted the footage out immediately. He wrote, "Our prayers are with this little angel as a full recovery is expected. Not quite sure a better example of protect and serve exists." The bystanders who stopped their cars on I-30 that morning and ran to the wreckage and put their hands on the side of a flipped sedan and pushed until their arms gave out were never identified by name in any reporting. They did not stop because they were trained. They stopped because a car was upside down on the shoulder of an interstate and something inside them didn't let them drive past it. The Fort Worth Police Department thanked them by name, meaning as a group without names, and said they were grateful to the Fort Worth citizens who saw someone in danger and, without hesitation, assisted. The footage shows what that looks like from the officer's perspective, a group of strangers and two cops, side by side, doing one specific thing together on a Thursday morning at 9:30 because there was a baby under a car and that was all that needed to be true. The officers and bystanders who lifted that car had no equipment, no machinery, no preparation. They did it with their hands and their weight and the particular human physics of a group of people who have decided simultaneously that they are not leaving until that car moves. If you had been driving past an I-30 and saw the crash, what would you have done? Tell me in the comments. And notice that the bystanders who stopped that morning never gave their names to reporters. They were just there, just people on their way to somewhere else who stopped. A 1-year-old girl, under a flipped Hyundai, on I-30 in East Fort Worth. Strangers and officers lifting it with their hands. Sergeant Nichols and Officer Bounds on their knees in the grass doing compressions. A hum, a cry, a full recovery expected, and footage that 130,000 people watched in a day, because every one of them needed to know how it ended. Moment 2. I've been in your shoes. Manhattan, New York, October 5th, 2023. October 5th, 2023. The Manhattanville neighborhood on the Upper West Side of Manhattan. A raised highway, the Riverside Drive highway runs above street level, and on the edge of the overpass above it, a man is standing on the outside of the fence, his feet on the narrow ledge, his hands behind him gripping the barrier. He is in crisis. He doesn't speak to the officers who arrive. He doesn't answer questions. He faces outward, looking down, and holds on. What comes next is 40 minutes of conversation that, when the bodycam footage was released by the NYPD 2 weeks later, became one of the most watched police videos of 2023. The two officers who responded that morning were Carl Fayette and Eleodoro Mata, both assigned to the NYPD's 26th precinct. Neither of them is a crisis negotiator by specialty. They are patrol officers. They arrived at a call for a man in distress on an overpass, and they did what patrol officers do. They assessed the situation. They got as close as they safely could, and they started talking. 40 minutes. The man never spoke. That detail is essential to understanding what made the next 40 minutes as difficult as they were. Fayette and Mata could not get any verbal feedback. They could not ask him questions and receive answers. They could watch his body, could see when he seemed to shift, when he seemed to lean further out, when a moment of stillness suggested he might be listening, but they had no confirmation that anything they said was reaching him. They were talking to a man on a ledge who was not talking back for 40 minutes in the open air above a highway in October. Fayette said things during those 40 minutes that are in the bodycam footage and have been widely quoted, because they are not the things that people expect to hear from a uniformed officer speaking into an unknown situation. He told the man, "I believe you are a good man. I promise you, brother, I promise you we will do anything in our power to help you." He told him, "I've been in your shoes, man. It's not worth it. There are solutions. There are ways to get out of this situation." He said, "You are stronger than this." He said, "Life is beautiful. Life is precious." He said, "You are beautiful. Brother, please don't give up on me." And toward the end of the footage, as a man bent further forward over the drop, Fayette said, "I love you. I love you. You have got this. Listen to my voice. I love you." Mata was beside him, providing the same thing, a presence, a voice, a human being who was not going anywhere. "We're here for you," Mata told the man. "Everybody's here for you. We're gonna help you." He said these things standing on a raised highway with traffic shut down and Manhattan spreading out below them, to a man who gave no indication of whether he could hear them or not. But they did not stop saying them, because they were all they had and they were going to use all of them. The ESU officers, behind the two officers and out of the man's direct line of sight, the NYPD's emergency service unit had been working. The ESU specializes in high-risk situations and crisis response. At some point during the 40 minutes, while Fayette and Mata kept the man's attention, the ESU cut a section of the fence. They put on safety harnesses. They climbed out onto the ledge themselves, shimmying along the outside of the barrier, positioning themselves without the man seeing them until they were close enough. When the ESU officers moved in and grabbed him, it happened fast before he could react. The crowd that had gathered below the overpass watching cheered. The bodycam captured the sound. And then Fayette walked away from the edge. He took a few steps toward a squad car. He crouched down, and he began to sob. The footage of that moment, an NYPD officer in full uniform crouching beside a cruiser with his face in his hands, his colleagues coming to put their hands on his back, was a part of the video that spread fastest online. Psychotherapist Stephanie Samuels, who runs a non-profit called Copline, providing confidential counseling for law enforcement, appeared on a New York local news station after footage was released and said what she saw in that moment was an officer who had connected with somebody and was absolutely relieved that it worked out the way it did. She described it as an emotional dump that many people have experienced after a high-stress situation resolves well. She said these are human beings that every day do a job that we make them not human. Fayette spoke to reporters after the footage went public. He said the words he used came from the heart. He said he did what you are supposed to do. He said that what kept him steady during the 40 minutes was his training, his faith, and the people he loves. Matter said what he carried away from the experience was knowing that the man was out there, that he was fighting, and that made him feel good. On October 24th, both officers returned to the overpass together. They stood in the afternoon sun and looked through the fence, the repaired section that the ESU had cut, and they pointed out where it had happened. The section of fence they looked through had been replaced. The ledge was empty. The man was alive and in treatment. The NYPD's decision to release the footage 2 weeks after the incident, rather than immediately, was deliberate. The department said it released it specifically to show the trauma these incidents can have on officers, to make visible not just the outcome of the crisis but the cost of the wake. The footage of Fayette crouching beside the cruiser and sobbing is not a failure. It is, in the NYPD's framing, the point. The department wanted people to see that the same officer who stood on that ledge for 40 minutes and kept saying, "I love you," brother, that officer is a human being who holds grief after the outcome is determined, just like anyone else would. The body does not simply stop when the emergency stops. It has to absorb what just happened. And what just happened, for 40 minutes, was Carl Fayette keeping a person alive with nothing but words and the willingness not to stop saying them. Officer Fayette told a man who was not responding to him, for 40 minutes, that he loved him, that he was beautiful, that life was beautiful, that he had been in the same place, and it was not worth it. He was a patrol officer who showed up at a call on an overpass. When it was over, he walked away from the edge and fell apart, and his colleagues held him. What does it take, do you think, to say those things to a stranger, not as a script, but as something you mean? Tell me what you think in the comments. 40 minutes on an overpass. A man who never spoke and never answered and bent further and further over the drop while 2 officers stood on the ledge and kept talking anyway. "I love you. Brother, please don't give up on me." The ESU cut the fence and grabbed him and the crowd cheered. And Fayette walked 2 steps to the right and folded at the knees and cried. That is what 40 minutes of keeping a person alive with only your words does to a human being when it is finally over. He cried, and then he went back to work. Moment 3. 3 weeks of training and 2 minutes across town. Hamtramck, Michigan, January 24th, 2025. January 24th, 2025. 9 in the evening. Hamtramck, Michigan, a small, densely packed city of roughly 25,000 people completely surrounded by the city of Detroit. K-9 Officer Jacob Hoxie has nearly 6 years on the job with the Hamtramck Police Department. He has responded to thousands of calls. He has never done infant CPR on a real patient. 3 weeks earlier, he and other officers in his department had completed a CPR training course. That training, conducted by a specialist brought in to focus specifically on saving children, would turn out to have been the most important professional development event in Officer Hawks' career. He just didn't know it yet, because it was 3 weeks ago and nothing had happened yet that required it. The 911 call that came in on the evening of January 24th described a 2-month-old baby who was not breathing. The caller could be heard saying the baby was turning blue. The dispatcher's voices in the recording assuring the caller that help was on the way. Hoxie was the first unit available. He activated his lights and sirens and drove from the Hamtramck Police Department to Hewitt Street, a distance that Google Maps would put at approximately 6 minutes under normal conditions. Hoxie covered it in under 2 minutes. What he found: baby Hashim was 2 months old. When Officer Hoxie arrived at the house on Hewitt Street and reached the child, Hashim's face had turned blue. His hands had turned blue. His feet had turned blue. Cyanosis, the blue coloring produced by oxygen deprivation, had progressed to the extremities, which meant the situation was acute and had been developing for long enough that the body was already struggling systemically. Hashim had choked on fluids, which had blocked his airway. He was not crying. He was not moving in the way that a 2-month-old child is supposed to move. In the bodycam footage, Hoxie immediately takes the baby into his hands. He later described what he saw with the directness of someone who had processed it enough to be precise about it. I could see that the child, his face was blue, his hands were blue, and his feet were blue. And then he did the thing he had practiced 3 weeks earlier. He started with back blows, the technique used for infant choking that involves holding the baby face down and delivering firm blows to the center of the back to dislodge an airway obstruction. When that did not produce the result he needed, he moved to chest compressions. 2 fingers, center of the chest, the careful, Measured pressure that is required for an infant because the margin between effective compression and dangerous force is much smaller than it is for an adult. The family was around him. Hoxie said later that they were praying while he worked. He was working and they were praying, and the room held both of those things at the same time. He continued the back blows and compressions, checking for response, continuing the cycle. And then, after a period that he described as intensely focused and that appeared on the body cam footage to last several minutes of sustained effort, he heard the sound that he said he will never forget. The sound. Baby Hashim began to cry. When Hoxie described that moment afterward, he said, "All that stress just exited my body. I will not forget that." Acting Chief Hussein Farhat and Deputy Chief Andrew Milesky both watched the footage and made the same observation. Hoxie performed the procedure the way an instructor demonstrates it in a training course. Milesky said the incident shows how stars align sometimes in their mission to protect and serve. Farhat said he wants his officers to take away from this incident the importance of humanity on the job. Baby Hashim was taken to hospital and assessed. The family described the incident as nothing short of a miracle. While they asked not to appear on camera, they expressed their gratitude with language that has a particular warmth of parents talking about someone who gave them their world back, because that is the exact phrase they used. They said Hoxie gave them their world back. This was the first time in his nearly 6 years on the force that Hoxie had performed CPR in a real emergency, not in a simulation, not on a mannequin, on a 2-month-old baby named Hashim, in a house on Hewitt Street, while the family prayed. 3 weeks after training, his message afterward was simple and direct. "I highly suggest take that CPR class. It could potentially save your child's life." Officer Hoxie had 6 years of law enforcement experience and had never performed CPR in a real emergency before January 24, 2025. 3 weeks earlier, his department had brought in a specialist to run a training focused specifically on pediatric resuscitation. What do you think of the idea that training matters more than experience in situations like this? And here's my real question. If you saw that call coming, a baby not breathing, turning blue, in your neighborhood, how long would it take you to get there? Tell me in the comments. Baby Hashim turned 2 months old in a world where Officer Jacob Hoxie exists. Hoxie drove 6 minutes in 2 minutes, walked into a house where a 2-month-old had turned blue, and did back blows and chest compressions with his hands until the baby cried. The training was 3 weeks old. It was the first time he had ever needed it for real. He said all that stress just exited his body when he heard the cry. He said he will never forget it. Baby Hashim is doing well. The family said he gave them their world back. Moment 4. Mo and Joe, the brothers on the radio. Melvindale, Michigan, November 7th, 2025. 2 a.m. Friday, November 7th, 2025. The intersection of Oakwood and Wood in Melvindale, Michigan, a small suburb just south of Detroit on the western bank of the Ecorse River. Melvindale Police Officer Al Hassan is running traffic enforcement in the early hours of the morning shift. He pulls over a speeding vehicle. The driver's window comes down. Before Officer Hassan can begin any standard part of this stop, the driver tells him why he was speeding. His wife, Maria, is 4 to 5 years old and in active labor in the passenger seat, and she was not going to make it to the hospital. This is not the explanation for a moving violation that any officer expects to hear. Officer Hassan calls for backup. Corporal Mohammed Hatcham arrives at the scene within minutes. Hatcham is 3 years into his career with the Melvindale Police Department. He is 26 years old. He has never delivered a baby. He looks at Maria in the passenger seat of the stopped car and understands immediately that EMS is not going to arrive in time. He also understands that this is now his situation to manage, that he is a trained emergency responder on scene, and that the next few minutes are going to ask him to do something his entire career so far has not prepared him for in any practical sense. The dispatcher then makes a critical decision. Priority medical assistance will be provided over the radio, which means the dispatcher will walk Hatcham through the delivery, step by step, in real time, while EMS is still en route. And then something happens that nobody in the Melvindale Police Department or at Dearborn Dispatch had planned or could have planned. The dispatcher who comes on the line, the voice that will guide Hatcham through the next several minutes, is Hatcham's younger brother, Mo and Joe. Interim Melvindale Police Chief Chris Egan later told reporters that the brothers are known in the department and at dispatch as Mo and Joe. Mohammed is the older brother, the corporal at the scene. His younger brother works at Dearborn Dispatch, which handles 911 calls from Melvindale. They are in different parts of the area's emergency response infrastructure, connected by a radio system that, at 2 in the morning on a November Friday, put a man's voice in his older brother's earpiece to walk him through something neither of them had ever done. The instructions came through clearly. I need her on the back and the center of the ground, and I will tell you exactly how to deliver the baby. Maria was in the passenger seat of the stock car and could not get out due to her condition. Hatcham worked to position her as best as possible within the constraints of the vehicle, managing her contractions, talking her through each stage, with his brother's voice as the only guide in his ear and EMS still somewhere on the road behind him. Head is coming out. Sir? Stay calm. Hatcham stayed calm. He credited his brother, afterward, in a statement that is one of the most precise descriptions of gratitude that anyone has put on record from a bodycam moment. Look, Dayborn dispatches amazing dispatches, but I think God wanted him on the radio that time and wanted me there at that place. Bismillah. The baby arrived. A girl. As she was safely delivered, Hatcham, who is Muslim, said a blessing in Arabic, Bismillah Yoremin Yorahim, which translates as, in the name of God, the most gracious, the most merciful. The bodycam captured the words. Maria, who is a devout Catholic, had been terrified. She had been asking God throughout her labor to protect her daughter. Interim Chief Egan said of Maria's perspective on the moment. She said he was a gift from God. Two people of different faiths, in the middle of a traffic stop at 2 in the morning, met in the same sentence. Both Maria and her daughter, named Galilea, were taken to the hospital and came home healthy. Maria spoke to reporters and said the experience had changed the way she thinks about police officers. She said, "For me, when you see a police officer, you always think it's something bad. But this time, it was something good. They were very respectful." She said the parking lot at Oakwood, and we will always remind her that miracles happen. This was, according to department records, the second time Corporal Hatcham had been involved in a life-saving incident. In 2023, while off duty, he was nearby when a 911 call came in about a 3-year-old choking. He heard the call on a radio and responded immediately, saving the toddler's life before EMS arrived. He was off duty and acted anyway. This is, apparently, who Mohammed Hatcham is. 2 brothers, one in a police uniform delivering a baby by the side of the road, one at a dispatch console walking him through it by radio in the middle of the night. Neither of them knew they would be sharing a shift in that way. Neither of them could have planned it. Their commanding officer says they are known at the department as Mo and Joe. Maria named her daughter Galilea and said that parking lot will always be where miracles happen. What do you call a moment like this? Tell me in the comments. A traffic stop at 2 a.m. A man with his wife in active labor who ran a light and was glad a cop pulled him over. Corporal Hatcham on scene with EMS still coming. His younger brother's voice in his ear, walking him through every step from the dispatch console. Head is coming out. Sir, stay calm. Bismillah. Baby Galilea, healthy and home. Maria, changed. And 2 brothers who will spend the rest of their lives knowing that on November 7th, 2025, the dispatch channel connected them to the same parking lot at 2 in the morning, and something that had nothing to do with planning made sure they were both there. Moment 5. The mother who didn't know. Indianapolis, Indiana, October 2024. Indianapolis, Indiana, October 2024. The Indianapolis Metropolitan Police Department receives a call from a residence that requires an officer immediately. The circumstances described are ones that no dispatcher or officer's training fully prepares them for. A mother is at home. She did not know she was pregnant. She has just given birth. The newborn is unresponsive. Officer Kelly Chappell of the IMPD is among the first responders dispatched to the address. What the department later released, as part of its ongoing Sworn to Serve Bodycam series in December 2024, is a footage from that call, footage that shows the inside of a residence, a mother in shock, and a newborn who is not breathing. The phrase "she did not know she was pregnant" carries a weight that is easy to underestimate. It means that none of the standard preparations for delivery existed. There was no prenatal care plan, no hospital bag, no designated route to a maternity ward. There was no psychological preparation for what labor would feel like or what delivery would require. The mother in this case experienced something that a small but documented population of people experience every year. A pregnancy that progresses without the physical symptoms typically recognized as pregnancy and ends in a birth that arrives as a complete surprise. The medical literature describes it as a cryptic or denied pregnancy, and it is more common than most people assume. But regardless of the frequency, the baby arrived, and the baby was not breathing, and Officer Kelly Chappell walked through that door alone, minutes before the Indianapolis Fire Department, with a newborn who needed resuscitation. What Chappell did. The bodycam footage shows Officer Chappell assessing the situation with compressed urgency of someone who has been trained for emergency medical response and is now inside one. She performs chest compressions on the newborn, a procedure that requires a specific and delicate technique for a baby that's new to the world, where the chest wall is soft and the margin of appropriate force is narrow. The footage captured in the department sworn to serve release shows the moments of those compressions and the arrival of the fire department, whose personnel joined Chappell and helped clear the baby's airway. The baby was transported to Riley Hospital for Children, one of the leading pediatric facilities in the state of Indiana. According to the Indianapolis Metropolitan Police Department, the newborn was recovering at Riley at the time the footage was released, due in significant part to Officer Chappell's actions in the minutes before the fire department arrived. The IMPD described Officer Chappell's response as exactly what their Sworn to Serve training series is designed to document: officers who arrive at situations that fall outside conventional definition of law enforcement and respond to the actual need in front of them, which in this case was a baby who needed chest compressions. Chappell did not wait. She did not step back because the situation was outside the scope of what a patrol officer is typically expected to handle. She walked in, assessed, and began. The mother in this case, whose identity was not released, faced a double shock of an unexpected birth followed by the immediate crisis of a child who needed resuscitation. There is no standard emotional vocabulary for what that experience is. What she witnessed in those minutes, an officer she had never met working to keep her newborn alive in her home, is the sort of thing that is almost impossible to categorize as either ordinary or extraordinary, because it is so specifically, precisely that one person at that one moment doing the only thing that needed to be done. Officer Chappell walked into a home where a woman who didn't know she was pregnant had just given birth alone, and the baby wasn't breathing, and she began chest compressions. The baby was taken to Riley Hospital for Children. What do you think the hidden skill requirement of police work is? The one that never makes it into any recruitment poster. Tell me in the comments. A mother who didn't know she was pregnant. A newborn who wasn't breathing. Officer Kelly Chappell, IMPD, alone in a residence with both of them before the fire department arrived. Chest compressions on a newborn. The baby transported to Riley Hospital for Children. Recovering, the department said, in significant part because of what Officer Chappell did in those minutes before backup arrived. The Sworn to Serve series released the footage in December 2024. The baby was alive. Moment 6. There are angels looking over us. Ohio, November 2024. November 2024. Ohio. A police department received a call about a woman on the upper level of a parking garage who appears to be in distress near the railing. Officers respond immediately. The footage from that response, released in February 2025, shows officers rushing to the top level of the structure and arriving to find a woman who is visibly upset, leaning toward the edge of the railing above a long drop. What follows is 4 minutes of conversation that makes the 40 minutes on the Manhattan overpass and the 40 minutes on the bridge in Richmond and every other piece of documented crisis intervention footage feel like it belongs to the same specific human tradition, the tradition of one person deciding to stay. Officer Newman arrives at the parking garage with colleagues and approaches the woman at the railing. The tone of the footage is not tactical. It is not clinical. Newman does not position himself in a way that suggests he is preparing for a physical intervention. He gets close. He starts talking. And within the first few exchanges, he says something that nobody could have scripted and that could only have come from a specific place inside his own life. Losing a daughter. The woman and Officer Newman are talking about loss. It's clear, from what the body cam captures, that she has experienced the loss of a child, that this is part of what has brought her to the top of a parking garage on a night in November with her hands on a railing. And Newman says to her, directly and without hesitation, "I lost my daughter many years ago, and I wish she could be here." He says, "There are angels looking over us. There is an angel for you." The body cam footage captures a 4-minute interaction. At the start of those 4 minutes, the woman is leaning toward the edge. Over the course of 4 minutes, Newman talks to her about the specific kind of grief that neither of them chose and both of them carry. He does not pretend the loss doesn't matter. He does not offer her the generic language of crisis intervention. He offers her his own experience, specifically, and the specific thing he has come to believe about it, that there are angels, that there is one for her, that he was sent there to talk to her because he understands how she feels. After about 3 minutes, the officers helped the woman safely away from the edge. Newman continued talking to her as they moved her to safety. He said, "I think that God sent me here to talk to you because I understand how you feel." The footage captured both his words and his, and the physical moment of the woman stepping back from the railing. She was safe. She was in crisis, and she was safe, and she was on her feet. The training that cannot be trained. What Officer Newman did on that parking garage ramp in November 2024 cannot be fully replicated by a training module. You can teach officers crisis communication techniques. You can teach them de-escalation frameworks, active listening structures, scripts for talking someone away from an edge. But you cannot train the specific vulnerability that Newman demonstrated, the willingness to say to a stranger on a railing in the dark that he had also lost a child, and that he had also had to find a way to keep going, and that he believed the same was possible for her. There is a concept in crisis work called common humanity, the idea that the thing most likely to reach a person in extreme distress is the authentic recognition that another human being understands the specific pain they are in, not because they were trained to say so, but because they have lived something similar. Newman did not deploy common humanity as a technique. He disclosed it as a fact. He said, "I lost my daughter many years ago." He said, "I wish she could be here." He did not position this as a therapeutic tool. He offered it as the truest thing he knew about how to keep going when grief feels unsurvivable. And what the woman on the railing heard, whatever she heard in that specific sentence from a specific officer who had no reason to tell a stranger the most painful thing in his life except that it was what she needed, was enough to take a step back from the edge. He told her this because it was true, because she needed to hear something real, and because, as he told her himself, he believed he had been sent to that parking garage specifically because he was a person in that department with exactly that experience and exactly that loss to offer her in that moment. Whether or not you share his theological framework for why he was there, what he did with his presence, the decision to be open about his own grief instead of holding it back in the name of professional distance is a thing that made 4 minutes enough. The department released the footage in February 2025. The Police One report accompanying the release described it as demonstrating the real and ongoing emotional weight that law enforcement carries into crisis situations, that officers do not leave their own experiences behind when they answer a call, and that sometimes the most effective crisis intervention tool is a life that an officer has lived. The woman is alive. She received help. Newman went back to work. Officer Newman told a woman on a parking garage railing that he had lost his daughter. He said, "There are angels looking over us. There is one for you." He said he thought God sent him there specifically. 3 minutes later, she stepped back from the edge. What is the thing, do you think, that another officer without that specific experience and that specific loss would not have been able to give her? Tell me in the comments. 4 minutes. A parking garage in Ohio in November. A woman at a railing. Officer Newman telling her he lost his daughter and he wishes he could be here and there are angels looking over us and there is one for you. And then the woman stepping back from the edge. And then Newman saying, "I think God sent me here to talk to you because I understand how you feel." 4 minutes. She is alive. The footage is real. The grief he shared with her was real. And the outcome is something that no policy document about crisis intervention would have predicted from the inputs. What the camera can and cannot hold. 6 moments. 6 cameras rolling before any of the people in them knew what was about to happen. An overturned car on an interstate. An overpass above a highway in Manhattan. A house in Hamtramck at 9 in the evening. A traffic stop at 2 in the morning in a Michigan suburb. A home in Indianapolis where a mother was holding a newborn who wasn't breathing. A parking garage ramp in Ohio in November. What connects them is not the category of emergency. They are not all the same kind of situation. What connects them is a specific quality of action that each of them captures. A person arriving at something they did not expect and choosing, without any preparation time whatsoever, to do exactly what was needed. Sergeant Nichols and Officer Bounds did not drive to work on October 23rd expecting to lift a car. Fayette and Matta did not expect a man who wouldn't speak for 40 minutes and an ESU team cutting through a fence while they kept talking. Hoxie did not know that a 2-month-old named Hashim was going to need the training he had completed 3 weeks earlier. Corporal Hatcham did not know that the voice in his earpiece was going to be his brother, or that he was going to deliver a baby named Galilei at an intersection at 2 in the morning, or that the blessing he said in Arabic was going to end up being the same prayer as the one a Catholic mother was saying in a stopped car. Officer Chappell did not know. Officer Newman did not know that the specific grief he carries was exactly the grief that the woman on the railing needed to hear acknowledged before she could step back from the edge. Nobody knows. That is what every one of these 6 moments has in common. The camera is rolling before the thing happens because nobody knows when the thing is going to happen. That is the point of the camera. That is the point of the training. That is the point of arriving every shift ready for what cannot be predicted, because the only certainty is that at some point, in some shift, in some career, the thing that cannot be predicted is going to happen. And when it does, the only thing that matters is what the person wearing that camera does next. And what today's 6 moments tell us is that there is no single answer to that question. The Fort Worth officers lifted a car because there was a car to lift. Fayette and Matta kept talking because talking was all they had. Hoxie used a technique he had practiced 3 weeks earlier with his hands. Hatcham delivered a baby with his brother's voice in his ear and said a prayer in Arabic. Chappell did compressions on a newborn without knowing a second ago that this was a call she was responding to. Newman gave a stranger the most painful thing he owned, because she needed it more than he needed to hold on to it. 6 completely different answers to the same impossible question. What do you do now? The right answer is always the same and always different. You do what the moment needs. You do it with what you have. And the camera watches. Hashim is well. Galilei is home. The baby from Fort Worth is recovering. The man on the Manhattan overpass is in treatment. The woman from the Ohio parking garage is alive. The newborn from Indianapolis was recovering at Riley Hospital for Children. 6 situations. 6 impossible outcomes that turned out to be possible. All of it on camera. All of it real. Drop in the comment below and tell me which of today's 6 moments you think is the rarest. Is it the car lift, the 40-minute vigil, the CPR 3 weeks after training, the brothers on the radio, the mother who didn't know, or the officer who offered his own grief? I want to know which one you're still thinking about. Share this episode with someone who needs to hear what police officers actually do on an ordinary shift. New episode coming. See you in the next one.